Hello and welcome to another tutorial. In this tutorial, I will show you how to create a simple kilometer converter using the Swing framework. So I'll call my program Kilometer Converter. Alright, so what I'm going to do is that first I'm going to create a JFrame object, but there are several ways that I can do this. I can explicitly create a JFrame object, but what I want to do is that I want to extend my class with a JFrame class. So first I'm going to need classes from the Swing framework, so I'm going to write an import statement for this Java Swing, and I'm importing all the classes in this Swing framework. So it's needed for the classes in the Swing framework. Okay. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this. I am extending the JFrame, that is my class, extends the JFrame class here. So now whenever I call my class, or when I create an instance, or I call the constructor of my class, the constructor of the JFrame is called implicitly. So the second thing I'm going to do here is to create my constructor. Alright, so within my kilometer converter constructor, that is where I'm going to create my window. And you know, because kilometer converter extends JFrame, it has inherited all the methods of the JFrame. So the first thing I'll do is that I'll give my window a title. So set the title of the window. So that is the first thing I'm doing here, and I'm calling the set title method of the JFrame that has been inherited by the kilometer converter. So I'm calling it kilometer converter here. Alright, the next thing I'll do here is that I'll set the dimension of my window, and here I'm coming up here to define some constant that I'm going to use for that. So these are constants for the window dimension, and they are private and final, and I'm calling it window width, and I'm giving it 310 pixels, and another one for the height, and I'm giving it 100 pixels. Alright, so I'm going to use these dimensions to set the size. So set the dimension of the window. Alright, so set size, and I have window width here, and then window height. Alright, the next thing I have to do is to set the default close operation of the window. You know, whenever you create a JFrame object or window and you click on the close button like this, if you look at this, there is a window, you know, that helps me. That is a GUI, that is the graphic user interface that helps me to interact with this program. And when I click on this X or a cross button, the program has to stop. But for a JFrame, by default, when you click on this, it hides, it doesn't stop. So I have to reset this such that when I click on this, it rather stops the program, but it doesn't hide. So what I'm gonna do right now is to set the default close operation, and with this one I call the method called set default close operation from the JFrame, and I say exit on close. So anytime that I click on that, it has to exit. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create a JPanel. I'm going to create my components and create a JPanel, then I'll add my components to the JPanel. So you know, these are components that I'm going to need. If you look at what we have, or the diagram that I showed to you, I'm going to need a label, that is a J label. I'm going to need a test field where the user is going to enter the values, and that is called the J test field. And I'm also going to need a button, that is a J button. So these are the three components that I'm going to use. And when we say a J panel is a container, and when we say a container is just a component that can also hold other components. So to do that, first, I'm going to build a panel, and I want to create a method to do that so that I will not be typing a whole lot of these things here. It's very cool when you use methods so that the code becomes very neat and reusable. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to step outside this constructor, and I'll create another method, a public one. So public void, and I'm calling it build panel, and that is where I'm going to build it. So the first thing, or the first component I'm going to talk about, is a label. And first I want to put a reference to the label outside the methods so that they can be accessed by all methods. So let me add a small comment here. So these are my components. All right, okay, and it is the J label. I'm calling it, and J label is found in the Swing framework. So that is the reason why that I had this import statement here, that is import javax.swing dot this star, that is the wildcard import. So all of these things are found there, or all of these classes are found there. So I'm calling it message label. So that is the message that the user is going to see. So message label, and I'm now going to create the message label object, or I'm going to create a J label object here. So I will use the new keyword to do that. And I want the message enter a distance in kilometers to be displayed. So that is why I have to put this here. So a little bit of comment here. Okay, so set the message for the user. So this is what the user will see. All right, so right after that, against it or beside it, I have to see a test field. So there is a test field for the user's inputs. So this is where the user is going to enter something, and there is a test field, we call it the J test field. And once again, I'm going to put a reference to that outside the methods. So that is the J test field, and I'm calling it the kilometer field. I think that is okay. So kilometer field, and I'm now going to create an object of that. And once again, I'll use the new keyword here. So J test field, and the J test field constructor can take an int value that determines the width of the field. So I'm going to give it 10. So that determines the width of the field that the users can enter the value. Now the last component I'm going to add here is a J button, and that is what the user is going to click to convert the distance from kilometers to miles, and I'm calling it the calc button, that is the calculate button. And here, so that is the calculate button. Okay, so I'm going to have calc button, and once again I'll use the new keyword to create. And the constructor of the J button can also take a string, that is the text that will, or the string character that will be displayed on the J button. And here I'm going to type just calculate. So that means it will calculate and convert it from kilometer to miles. Now there's one thing I have to say here. Anytime that you use some special components like the J button, it creates events, and for the J button, the type of event that it creates is called action event. So anytime that you click on it, something has to happen. So when you click on it, an event or an action is created. and you have to create, or you have to create some code to respond to these events, and that code is called, we call it the action listener, or the event listener. But this type of event is an action event, so we call it the action listener. So what I'm going to do right now is that one way to respond to the event of a button is to create what we call inner classes. So I will leave this here, then I'll get down the build panel method, and I'm going to create an inner class. It's going to be a private class. I'm calling it calc button listener. So literally what this will do is that it will listen to the event that occurs. Immediately you click, or the user clicks on the button, an event is created. So you have to listen to it and respond to it. So the event says that calculate, so we have to do that calculation. So what this inner class will do is that it will implement an interface that we call the action listener. So it implements this interface called action listener, and when it does that, it has to override the method of the action listener, which is called action performed. So we have a method, public void, we call it action performed, and this method takes an action event object. All right, now this action listener is found in the java.awt.events. So you can see that it is automatically imported here. java.awt.events.action event, this one is found there, and we also have this one too, but I can clean this and give a wildcard importation so that it will be cool for all. So both the action events and that of the listener are found in this event. Okay, so that is okay. So what is going to happen here is that I'm going to do some small mathematics here, that it's the event, that is the action that has to occur here. So what will occur here is that I'm going to calculate from kilometers to miles. The first thing I will do is that I'll create a local variable called input, just to hold the input from the JTest field. So this is to hold input, and I'll create another one called results. That is, after doing the mathematics, I want to store that in this variable. So to store the results. All right, so that is essentially what I'm going to do here. And the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to receive the input from the JTest field. So input equals, and I'll have the kilo test field. I'll use, the JTest field as methods. One of them is the get test, which is used to extract the input entered by the user. So the get test field extracts it in the form of a string. So here what I'm doing is that I am extract the value entered by the user. So that is what I'm doing here. Now after extracting, I'm now going to do the calculation. So I'll store it in this, and I'll call the double wrapper class, to convert the input from string to double. So what I'm going to do is that I'll type double.parse double, and I'll put in the inputs variable here. So times, and if I'm converting to miles, I will multiply by 0.6214. all right, so let me even install this in a constant. I think that will be great. So I'm going to define another variable. I'm calling it conversion, and I'll give the value to 0.6214. okay, so instead of just typing the figure here, I'm going to type the conversion here. So that is okay. With this, if I want to change the constant, I just have to go up there and change it. It's pretty simple this way. Okay, and so now I'm going to call another class. We call it the JOption class to print out my value. But there is one more thing, because I'm dealing with decimals here, I'm going to have a lot of decimal values. So what I'm going to do is that I want to use the decimal format class to format my outcome or my output. So there's my format, and I'm calling it value. I think that is okay, and I'll create a new decimal formats objects, and I want it to be in this form. So comma 3. So what this means is that I want the result to be left to 2 decimal places, and if there are a lot of numbers here, I want a comma to separate every 3 digits. So there is just a formatting object here, so I'm going to apply that here, and I'll call there, so I'll say print it out here. So I'll call the J option pin dot show message dialog, view null, and then I'll say the input, that is input, that is whatever the user put there, kilometers. So let me type kilometers, converted to miles is. Then I'll put the result here, but I want to format it first, so I'll call value dot formats. Format is a method of the decimal format class, so dot format, then I'll put the result in it. So that is okay. All right, so that is done for the inner class, but I have not created an instance of the inner class, that is the calc button listener. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to register this inner class or listener with the calc component, or the calculator, oh sorry, the calculator, or the J button component. So register the listener with their calc button. So I'll call calc button, and I'll say add action listener, and I'll create an instance of it. So instance of the action listener, and I have registered it with it. Now the next thing is that I have created my components, but I have not added them to a J panel. So the first thing I'll do is that I'll create a J panel, and once again I want to put reference to the J panel outside the method. So I'm going to type J panel, and then I'll call it panel here, and I will now create an instance of the J panel. So I'll say create a panel, or let me say J panel. So I'll say panel, I'll use the new keyword once again, J panel. So there is an instance of the J panel. So I'm now going to add the component to the panel. Okay, so I'll say panel add, and you know, the order that you add the component is pretty much important. For a J panel, the default layout is a flow layout. So the first which will be entered will be the message label. So we have that one first. Then after that, I will add the JText field, which will be beside the label. So I'll have panel.add the kilometer field. All right, and the last thing will be the J button. So I have panel.add the calc button. So I have added them, and I'm done. So that is the method to build a panel, but in actual fact I have not called this method, so that means that I have not created any panel yet. So within the JFrame constructor, I am now going to create the panel. So what I will do is that I'll call this method, that's the build panel, and I'm not getting the spelling. Okay, so I've now created the panel. All right, so after creating the panel, I have to now add the panel to the JFrame. So add the panel to the window. And one thing that you have to understand is that both the JFrame and the JPanel have add methods. Because I am within the JFrame constructor, or let me say the Kilometer Converter constructor, but one thing is that the Kilometer Converter class has extended the JFrame, as you can see here. So that means that the methods of the JFrame are now the methods of the Kilometer Converter, and of course this class belongs to it. So there is no need to create an instance of it before I can call it add method. Unlike the JPanel, which was just found within a method, I had to explicitly create an instance of it before I could call it method. So just get that difference here. So I'm going to add the panel to the window, and I'll say add, and I'll add the panel to it. So that is that. I have added it to it. Now the next thing is that the J-frame is by default invisible, so you have to make it visible. So I'll say set the visibility. So I will set it to true, and this takes a Boolean value. So I've set the visibility. So I'm almost done with it. And I've created a lot of these things, but I have not even created an instance of the Kilometer Converter. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a main method, and I'll call the Kilometer Converter. So I have public static void main, and okay, so I'll call the new keyword, and because I'm not going to use the object of the Kilometer Converter for anything, I'm not going to give a reference variable to it. I'm just going to call the new keyword here, and I'll pass it to it. So here, create instance of the Kilometer Converter. So that is all here. So the program is done, and when I run this, I should have something printed out here. All right, so I'll click on run, and yes, that is what I see here. When I close this, that is what you see. So I see enter a distance in kilometers. So when I enter, say 45, and I click on calculate, I see 45 kilometers converted to miles is 27.96. All right, let me try a higher value so that I'll see how things will be formatted at. So I'm going to try 45921, which is 45,821 kilometers in miles, and I see 45,821 kilometers converted to miles is 28,473. Okay, so you can see the comma separating the digits. That is as a result of the decimal format class that I called here. You can see it here, the decimal format class, and this was automatically imported into my program here. So I have import java.test.decimal format here. So that is how we do it.